of the global finals. So looking really forward to seeing how these players are going to lead out. We have got the Groudon and the Incineroar leading out there for Leonardo. On the opposing side of the field, though, for Christopher, it's going to be Mimikyu and Incineroar. So Intimidate's a piece, Fake Out's a piece, and Mimikyu is sitting there, maybe wanting to get up that Trick Room.
Yeah, the Mimikyu here on Christopher's side is going to be able to get the Trick Room. You would imagine the Groudon getting the Sun Up's quite nice because it does give you the option to maybe go for a Precipice Blades here and then double up into the Mimikyu with maybe a Flare Blitz from the Leonardo's Incineroar, which, you know, with the Sun boosting it might be enough, but the Intimidate that Christopher's let out with the Mimikyu really helps kind of dull down those attacks and probably able to going to take it. So unless you're seeing something like Taunt on the opposing Incineroar, then it's a pretty easy time that the Mimikyu is going to have here.
Yeah, you essentially need to double down the Mimikyu, but having access to Fake Out as Christopher does, then you're going to be able to protect your Mimikyu from that second attack. The Fake Out went straight down into that Groudon. Mimikyu, however, will have to take the U-turn coming out from the opposing Incineroar, indicating it is potentially that Salt Vest variant, you know, not able to run Parting Shot with that item. And it does break the disguise. So that does mean Leonardo's kind of done the one thing you need to do against Mimikyu early to maybe prepare yourself to get a KO later on in the game. But there isn't really an option here to be able to stop that Trick Room. We didn't see a Taunt come out in that occasion. So Leonardo now has a choice. Which Pokemon does he want to bring in from the back to best suit the Trick Room environment?
Yeah, and there isn't really too many options, especially when the Sun's up. And there's something like Venusaur you don't really want to bring in front of these Pokemon. The Umbreon that he has just brought in, probably the best option that he's got on his entire team. So the Groudon and the Umbreon, probably the best suited to a Trick Room environment. And Leonardo doing the smart thing, getting the Incineroar off the field. So if the Ice Rider Calyrex does come in for Christopher, at least he's got the Intimidate to bring in and kind of mitigate the attack power straight away from that Pokemon.
Yeah, exactly. I think you sort of said it really right in team preview about the disruption that Umbreon can potentially cause, and I think being able to apply some pressure with something like a Yawn here could just kind of disrupt those Trick Room turns for Christopher. And at the moment, the Pokemon that Christopher's got in play, they're not really the key Trick Room Pokemon that you want. Umbreon is going to move first in this environment, go for the Foul Play into the Mimikyu, take up below 50% damage. Incineroar, however, going to go for that powerful Flare Blitz in the Sun. You can just see the absolute bulk here of that Umbreon. Of course, the Incineroar has also taken a Intimidate previously. Groudon, however, going to capitalize on that. It also took an Intimidate in turn 0, but it's now going to be at +1 attack thanks to that Sword Stance. Mimikyu, you know, doubling up into the Umbreon, going for that Play Rough. You can see these Intimidates really paying off. Combined with the bulk of that Umbreon, is going to be able to take those attacks sort of all day long.
Yeah, and really powerful attacks. You see how beneficial the Intimidate was, like you say, Lou, there, just being able to take the double up, the Play Rough, and the Sun-boosted Flare Blitz from the Incineroar. The problem is, for Christopher right now, is he needs to adjust his board position to get something like the Ice Rider Calyrex onto the field, but by doing that, he's wasting these Trick Room turns, and Leonardo's really capitalizing on the fact that, you know, he's got that room, there's not really too much that's threatening him right now with the Mimikyu. Incineroar on the field, getting that Sword Stance play was huge, and the Groudon now in a position where it's going to be a lot more threatening, not really hindered by the Intimidate. We have just seen a Parting Shot onto it, so it's neutral again, but still in a good position to do some big damage this next turn.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The ball position needs to be shaken up, and having the Incineroar in the back to come and Intimidate a little bit later on just stops the Groudon from being able to kind of get those Sword Stances up as freely as possible. Moonlight going to come out from the Umbreon. We've already seen it's the fastest thing in Trick Room, and I think this is a good call here from Leonardo, just going to use the opportunity to regain all that HP that Christopher tried to chip away in the previous turn. Groudon going to go for this neutral Precipice Blade. It's going to be enough to finish off the Mimikyu. Not going to deal too much to the Calyrex, and this does give Christopher now the opportunity to maybe bring that Incineroar in from the back again, or you could go for that Amoonguss, as I believe he has done, to capitalize on this Trick Room environment. You can go for some redirection and protect up your Calyrex a little bit more.
Yeah, the Amoonguss play here is a really nice one because it just gives you that complete protection for the Calyrex going into this next turn. It means you're not really worried about potential Yawns from the Umbreon or foul plays that would also hit pretty hard. And also, you know, the Groudon can go for Precipice Blades, but if it does that, you know, it's kind of a sitting duck for something like a Max Hailstorm that could come into that slot if it decides to go down that route. The Incineroar, though, for Leonardo might be a nice call to bring in here, but you've got to be worried the whole time. If Amoonguss doesn't redirect and it starts putting things to sleep with Spore, have you got a way to kind of get around that? Because that's going to make it more difficult to kind of play out these last few turns of Trick Room, which is what he really needs to do to start kind of build momentum on his side of the field.
Yeah, it can certainly cause a lot of disruption, and it might even enable Christopher to be able to get up another Trick Room later on in the game if all of Leonardo's Pokemon are sleeping. We are going to see our first Dynamax here of Global Finals, and I believe it's going to be that Calyrex. No surprises here. It's such a great Pokemon to be in its kind of Dynamax form. It can apply a lot of pressure and can also try and get some boosts up here on the field as well, with its Nay ability as well, trying to boost itself up. I think the interesting thing though from Leonardo's side, bringing in that Incineroar here, it's thrown down another Intimidate, and Amoonguss going straight for the Spore. We've seen Christopher constantly targeting down against this Umbreon. He knows it's a threat. Putting it to sleep now stops any foul plays and stops any yawns coming Christopher's way. Calyrex is going to go straight for that Max Hailstorm, however, going to connect down into that Umbreon. It really does seem to be the Pokemon that Christopher just wants off the field, but it is going to take a lot of hits to be able to remove it.
Yeah, and it's a nice, really concentrating down on that slot's probably quite a smart thing to do, because you know it's the one Pokemon that's going to be so disruptive to you kind of executing your plans. If you can remove it quickly, it's going to make your life a lot easier, you know, going forward, especially for Christopher here. He's not got many turns of Trick Room left, so he really needs to take advantage of these now. He's going to be able to get a Spore into the Incineroar slot, but still at the same time got to worry about a potential fake out that could, you know, make it, you're not able to get the Spore off. And Incineroar with the Intimidate probably going to be able to take a Max Quake attack from the Calyrex here. So not in the worst position, and doing that as well allows you one turn more where your Umbreon can potentially wake up.
Yeah, Calyrex just committing to the Max Hailstorm here, once again targeting down into that opposing Umbreon. But you know, Umbreon, we've seen it can go for that Moonlight. It has woken up, but instead it's just going to go straight for this Yawn. And this is now where things do get a little bit interesting. The Calyrex will be falling asleep on the next turn if it doesn't switch out. But then if you're Christopher, you never really want to switch out your Dynamax Pokemon, so it does put him in a little bit of a pickle.
Yeah, very awkward position right now, and you can see the Umbreon, how well it takes these attacks with that Intimidate support from the Incineroar is pivotal. The early wake up here is really useful, because obviously getting that Yawn into the Calyrex right now does make it very disruptive for the Calyrex to kind of actually get anything out of these Trick Room turns. You know, Trick Room will be ending soon. The Amoonguss is going to be able to go for a Spore this turn, but then the Trick Room's going to end, and then where do you go from there? You've still got something like the Groudon in the back that can come in, change the weather, and also the Umbreon as well take advantage of that sun and start moonlighting and getting that health back. And obviously it gets a bit more of a buff with the sun out on the field, because it gets that extra health that it wouldn't normally get if there was no weather present.
Yeah, really good point there, Lee. Again, demonstrating the good synergy that Leonardo has on his field with that kind of sun ability being in play. Amoonguss just going to go straight for a Protect here on this occasion, though, as Incineroar has joined the field for Christopher. The Flare Blitz coming out from the Incineroar, obviously well avoided by the Protect there, but Umbreon going once again for a Yawn, this time targeting down into that Amoonguss. So Incineroar gets in relatively unscathed, and I think what's interesting, Christopher decided to preserve up that Calyrex, wanting to make sure that it didn't fall asleep, so they still has it in the end game towards the, sort of as this game starts playing out.
Yeah, I'm actually a turn behind here because the Trick Room's already ended, Lou. So this going into that last turn, the Trick Room was already ended. So I do apologise for that. But you could see there that Christopher already on the back foot because the Trick Room's not in effect anymore. Had to switch out the Calyrex there, put him in a really awkward position. And now has he got access to Trick Room again? Because you need to kind of try and set up a board position here, probably try and put the Incineroar to sleep if you can, with a fake out, maybe Spore here, but not going for it. If you can survive this, which it can, it's got an opportunity to try and maneuver some sort of position where you've got the Calyrex and maybe like a Amoonguss on the field to try and get that set up once again.
Yeah, Umbreon, however, still hanging out on the field. Incineroar is not able to remove it from play, so Umbreon is able to get that Yawn down onto the opposing Amoonguss here. Amoonguss, however, going to retaliate with a Spore targeted down into that Incineroar, so just going to stop any potential Flare Blitzes from coming down into its direction here. And I think this is where things start to get interesting. Of course, I mentioned earlier maybe the Christopher could try and get Trick Room set up again, but that Mimikyu has actually been KO'd. It's gone into its Pokeball, so Christopher doesn't have that option anymore. Speaking of Pokemon that's left the field, though, the Umbreon does finally succumb to the Hail Chip damage.
Yeah, it's finally down, but it's done more than enough work for Leonardo. I think the only hope for Christopher, maybe if he's running Trick Room on the Ice Rider Calyrex, that could be his option, that he could go down. But it's solo health now, you know. Leonardo's going to be able to get the Groudon onto the field potentially now and just press up his blades and pick up a knockout onto probably both the Incineroar and the Amoonguss in one hit. And, you know, at this point, you don't really want to be switching around your Pokemon because they're so low health. At this point, if you switch anything in, it's probably going to take too much damage, especially a combination from the Incineroar that's now supported by the Sun once again. Leonardo really kind of managing this matchup that could have been very difficult very well. You know, the Umbreon doing so much work here.
Yeah, the Umbreon really did kind of take a lot of the focus from Christopher in that match. There were a lot of doubles up into that slot, and it's allowed Leonardo to kind of pivot Pokemon around. The Groudon's now here on the field where Christopher's Incineroar already was in play, so it won't have to take that Intimidate. Also revealing the Venusaur that was hanging out in the back is going to be able to come in and capitalize on the fact that Leonardo has got the weather advantage here with the Sun. Christopher's Blaze does come out, and like you said, Lee, very likely to get the double KO, and it does. If you're Christopher, you're really hoping for potentially a miss to come out there. I think Incineroar was trying to go for that passing shot to switch things around for Christopher, but to no avail, unfortunately. Just Groudon too strong.
Yeah, it's just proven too much, you know, with the double target attack, especially coming off such a high attack stat as well. Even when you're not weak to those moves, you can see how much damage it does. We saw it to the Calyrex earlier on when Christopher switched that in on Precipice Blades, you know. It's doing so much damage, and now Leonardo in a position where he can, well, he's got the choice to max either Pokemon here. You probably go with the Groudon, but you don't necessarily need to, and he's still got that Incineroar on the back that he can come in and utilize the Intimidate one more time, just to protect whatever he's got out in the field.
Yeah, of course, and Venusaur as well could be a potential sort of max Pokemon here. It's carrying something like Weather Ball. It could always go for something like that Max Flare, but instead it is going to be that Groudon here. So going to be able to deal a really good chunk of damage coming out from the Groudon. And of course, Venusaur, it can try and put the opposing Pokemon to sleep just to make things easier, or just go on the offensive at this stage here. It is indeed going to go for that Weather Ball, so going to be able to target down into the Calyrex with a sort of powerful Fire-type move here. Not going to be enough to pick up the KO, but I'm pretty sure Groudon's got this covered.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's more than enough from the Venusaur there, with the fire-type Weather Ball coming out from the Sun, and Groudon going to be able to clean this one up. And Groudon really like a bit of an unsung hero in this match. You know, it's not really done too much, but the way that Leonardo's played it with that Sword Stance play, and then just getting the damage where necessary, taking it out of the action until it was like good time to bring it in, and really utilizing that and the Umbreon perfectly in this match. So making it very difficult for Christopher to actually get anything out of those Trick Room turns.
Yeah, I'm absolutely enchanted with that Umbreon, to be honest. It was just did so well in that game. It's such a little innocent Pokemon, but it actually sort of came out, managed to take all those attacks, was able to then apply some pressure with something like the Yawn. Also having Foul Play on there as well just allowed it to deal that little bit of damage here and there, and it was obviously critical to try and remove the Mimikyu from play, so that once the Trick Room turns are over, then there was no potential for it to be reset up again for Christopher. So removing it very early on just meant that constantly, as soon as Trick Room was over, Christopher was going to be at that speed disadvantage.
Yeah, and you've got to think, if you are Christopher going into this next match, you've got to presume that Leonardo will bring the Umbreon again. So you're thinking, okay, well, how Leonardo dealt with my Mimikyu is how I need to deal with the Umbreon. So I need a way to remove that as quick as possible, because once that has been removed, you're not worrying about Yawns anymore. You're not worrying about having to switch out and give your opponent opportunities, give them room to set up and things like that. We've seen Leonardo take advantage of time and time again. And it then allows you to maybe set your Trick Room up and really take advantage of all 5 turns, because we saw there, you set the Trick Room up, it was a couple of turns into it before you even got Calyrex onto the field, and then by the time the Umbreon was in action again, got the Yawn off and forced the switch out anyway, so it wasn't really able to capitalize at any point there and build that momentum that you kind of want to see in these games.
Yeah, it was difficult for Christopher to get the ball rolling there. So let's jump into game 2 and see how he's going to be able to adapt as we play out the rest of this set. Of course, he's got 2 other Pokemon that were benched. The 2 I know you were looking forward to seeing, Lee, so I wonder if it will come through. Leonardo there, bringing out the Incineroar and the Groudon, whereas on the opposing side of the field for Christopher, we've got the Mimikyu and the Amoonguss.
Yeah, the Amoonguss makes a lot more sense here, because if you do suspect maybe the Umbreon coming out as a lead from Leonardo, then at least you've got the option to kind of try and put it to sleep turn 1. But you've also got the option now to switch in your Incineroar this next turn, in particularly, to get an Intimidate, maybe soak up, fake out pressure from Leonardo's side of the field, or you could just be very bold and maybe go for a spawn to something like the Groudon or the Incineroar slot, expecting maybe a parting shot from the Incineroar or a Sword Stance from the Groudon on Leonardo's end.
Yeah, exactly. Lots of options coming out here. Of course, once again, the Trick Room is exactly what Christopher's going to be going for here. He's got the supportive Pokemon here with the Amoonguss, but then on the opposing side, like you said, Leonardo can still apply a lot of pressure. You've got the fire options there with the Incineroar, but then also sort of having the fake out can stop the ground from going to sleep. It could be a good opportunity here for Leonardo to maybe try and get that Sword Stance up.
Yeah, and I think it's probably not a bad option as well, because you've got the coverage now from the fake out from the Incineroar to prevent a Spore at least turn 1. But we are just going to see the Groudon go for a Rock Slide here. Wants to just get that double damage, maybe fish for a flinch as well. The secondary effect on the Rock Slide, and also it breaks the Disguise, which is so important for dealing with the Mimikyu going forward. Not going to be able to prevent the Trick Room here, but we are going to see the Incineroar target into the Mimikyu, maybe suspecting a Protect on the Amoonguss from Leonardo's end. A really nice way for him to actually pivot out and get something else onto the field, namely maybe that Umbreon that we saw in Game 1.
Yeah, I was wondering what the move was going to be coming out from the Incineroar there. Maybe something like a Dark-type move can deal some good damage to that opposing Mimikyu, and considering the Incineroar on Leonardo's side had got in without being intimidated, could have done a decent chunk of damage. But Leonardo actually bringing in the Venusaur from the back here, a Pokemon that's now going to be the slowest thing here in the Trick Room environment.
Yeah, but it is immune to the Spore from the Amoonguss, which gives it a little bit more room, you know, and it can do some decent damage to the Mimikyu here. It can target into that slot with a big, it can max if it wants to, and if it's got something like Sleep Powder, it can target into that slot as well and potentially pick up, you know, putting something to sleep like the Calyrex that potentially could switch in this turn, because Christopher, as we've seen, just got his Trick Room up. He needs to start making and taking advantage of these turns as soon as possible.
Yeah, Calyrex going to join the action here, like you said, trying to take advantage of Trick Room at every opportunity, and you've got the support there from Amoonguss as well, because Amoonguss can try and put this opposing Groudon to sleep. That's exactly what we see happening here. Amoonguss targeting down with the Spore. So Leonardo not going to be able to utilize Groudon on this particular turn, but Venusaur able to potentially go for something like this, the Sleep Powder itself into that slot, but instead going straight for the Weather Ball, capitalizing on the sun in the sky, targeting down into the Amoonguss. Not enough to be able to pick up a KO, but of course dealing super effective damage. Means the Amoonguss isn't going to be hanging around for long if it wants to stay here on the field.
Yeah, that's a really nice play here from Leonardo, you know, not capitalizing on the fact that you could go for the Mimikyu or switch in whatever the Mimikyu switches out for and target down onto the Amoonguss, the more supportive, really disruptive Pokemon on Christopher's side of the field. Now, it's a bit like in Game 1 where Leonardo had his Umbreon, you know, if you remove that from the field, then your game plan becomes a lot easier. It's the same can be said for Leonardo here. If you can remove that Amoonguss, there's no redirection, there's no potential being put to sleep by it, you know, so removing it very quickly kind of frees up the rest of the match for you.
Yeah, I like the switch here as well by Leonardo, bringing in the Incineroar. It can throw down and intimidate against that Calyrex. Also allows you to have to fake out in the next turn to apply pressure to potentially the Amoonguss, or if Amoonguss wants to switch out to reset with its Regenerator ability, get a little bit more HP back, you've then got the fake out to apply to whatever Pokemon comes in its place. Umbreon, however, that delightful Pokemon, is joining the field for Leonardo. So going to be able to once again apply pressure with being able to take those really big attacks. Particularly if it is something like the Ice-type move coming down into what was the Venusaur, that could be a very sort of wise target there from Christopher. We know how well the Umbreon can take those moves, so it definitely is a nice switch here for Leonardo.
Yeah, he's got the Intimidate onto the Calyrex. It's a big, important thing that you need to do with your Incineroar, you know, take advantage of that, because we saw from Game 1 how well the Umbreon can take those hits. A big critical hit there, though, from a Sludge Bomb. Not going to help out the Umbreon, but if this is a target of this Max Hailstorm, we know it's going to be able to take it, but it does put it in a bit more of a precarious position going into this next turn.
Yeah, I mean, great switch there from Leonardo. The Sludge Bomb there to break the Focus Sash on the opposing Venusaur there. So being able to follow it up with the Max Hailstorm, that very likely been possibly even a big KO there against that opposing Venusaur. I don't know how much the Intimidate would have paid off there necessarily, but it does mean, again, that Umbreon just able to take that. Venusaur is going to be a little bit safer in the back with Groudon, which is going to be able to reset the weather, so when Trick Room is over, Leonardo has the speed advantage on his side of the field.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You've got to, if you are Leonardo, you've got to play out these Trick Room turns and then get your big kind of your powerhouses back onto the field in a position where they can start knocking what's left out pretty quickly, you know, like the Amoonguss and the Calyrex with those Precipice Blades. And, you know, we've already seen the Weather Ball, how hard that can hit. But from Christopher here, just wants to go for a double protect, as the fake out is going to come out from that Incineroar this turn.
Yeah, just playing defensively on this turn. He's got to be careful, though, he's not burning through too many of these Trick Room turns. Just stops the Calyrex from potentially taking a yawn and maybe being forced to switch out. It would allow Christopher to be able to use this third Dynamax turn without being forced to switch.
Yeah, and I think that was the big worry here. If you are Christopher here, you probably want to spore the Umbreon here. Stop it, doing anything, and probably double tap into that slot with Max Quake or Max Hailstorm just to remove it completely. And you've got a safe target there, because whatever comes in, either the Venusaur or the Groudon, if he does decide to make a switch, is going to hit for super effective damage. So it's a pretty easy kind of switch to make, to be honest. And removing the Umbreon here, the last turn you couldn't do that, because you'd be the fake out would stop the Amoonguss from getting the spore or the attack off, and then you're going to take potentially a yawn or a foul play, which could be very detrimental to the whole overall game plan.
Once again, Christopher doubling down into that Umbreon slot, removing it from play. And I think Leonardo was able to capitalize on that, maybe identifying some of Christopher's sort of game style here, being able to bring in that Venusaur, even in the face of the Calyrex with the Max Hailstorms, knew very likely the Umbreon was going to be the target of both the opposing Pokemon. So brought in Venusaur very safely there, just as the Trick Room ends as well. So this is a great opportunity for Leonardo to bring back in that Groudon, set the sun up, and allow Venusaur to just kind of do exactly what we know Venusaur does, put things asleep and do really big damage as well, particularly to both these Pokemon that don't like fire-type moves.
Yeah, and Christopher hasn't been able to use any of those Max Quakes that we've seen maybe Calyrex use in previous sets and things like that to boost its special defense. So it's going to be taking big damage this next turn if the Venusaur does decide to go with a Max Flare or potentially just the Weather Ball supported by that Groudon Sun. And you've got to think as well, Leonardo also has the Incineroar on the back, can come in with the Intimidate, Mitigate, and remove that attack boost that the Calyrex has just got from that knockout onto the Umbreon with its chilling ability. And with the Trick Room ending, it is very difficult. The Incineroar going to actually hit the field rather than the Groudon, so Leonardo being very cautious, patient before he's going to bring that Groudon onto the field, and probably not a bad option. Removing the attack boost from the Calyrex here is very important, I think, to allowing you that little bit of extra room, and especially because you can't fake it out this turn, and then just get rid of the Amoonguss with maybe a Sludge Bomb and just take that threat away from the opposite side of the field.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think, like you say, counteracting that Chilling Neigh, having faked that opportunity as well, it does allow Venusaur that little bit more breathing room. And of course, if you're Leonardo, you can still apply pressure from the fact that you could do a hard switch and bring in that Groudon from the back as well if you like. It essentially means as well that the weather is really in Leonardo's control. Having already used the Dynamax on Christopher's side, there's no way to be able to manipulate that further. And Leonardo still does have access to his Dynamax as well. Yeah,
but the one thing you can say about this match is that Christopher's definitely utilizing his Pokemon a lot better here. He's in a lot better position than he was in that first game, where the Trick Room has ended, which is a bit unfortunate, but he does still have the Mimikyu and access to that, and potentially a fourth Pokemon that he could bring in as well, and start really utilizing those Pokemon where Leonardo's got a sleeping Groudon. You can see the work that the Amoonguss has put in here, and he's already lost the Umbreon.
Yeah, the Groudon's going to join the field and maybe trying to burn through some of those sleep turns as well. Christopher's going to switch as well, bring in the Incineroar, so that's going to apply the Intimidate to the opposing Groudon and Venusaur, but Venusaur's still looking to be in a good position where potentially go here for a Dynamax, or even just try and put a Pokemon to sleep that was in that slot, so aiming for the Calyrex, but could potentially try and catch the Incineroar. This is where things are a bit different from game one, though. This Mimikyu is still hanging around at this stage, but Leonardo is going to go for that Dynamax, so I wonder if Venusaur is going to have something to say about it.
Yeah, and if it starts maybe and gets the G-Max Vine Lash off, it will start that residual damage, and we know how really dominating that just chip damage alone can be on an opposing team, and make it very difficult for them to kind of start building any sort of momentum, because the chip damage alone is just too much. But we're going to see a Max Quake here. Is it going to be enough into the Mimikyu slot, which was the Amoonguss here, not into the Incineroar, but getting the special defensive boost anywhere, and it does give Groudon a little bit of room here to potentially wake up, because that's what you need if you're Leonardo. You need this Groudon to wake up as soon as possible. Maybe go for a double up into that Incineroar now with a Max Quake and a Precipice Blades, and potentially that will be enough to remove it, but not seeing it. And Christopher may be able to get another Trick Room up here, Lou.
Yeah, very possible. Leonardo making another switch here, retrieving the Groudon back into its Pokemon, bringing out that Incineroar. Again, just being able to apply that Intimidate that we saw in game one was so critical to the damage output that Incineroar and the Mimikyu are capable of. The speed advantage, however, is sort of full steam ahead for Leonardo. It goes for that very powerful G-Max Vine Lash going straight down into the Mimikyu, so no Trick Room is going to be coming out for Christopher in the rest of this game too. Incineroar going to go for that Flare Blitz, but thanks to the Dynamax, Venusaur going to be able to take that, but huge damage in the sun.
Yeah, massive damage, and really helped there by the switch into the Incineroar on Leonardo's side, just getting that -1 into the attack stat. Onto Christopher's Incineroar is allowing the Venusaur to take that a lot more comfortably than it would have without that. So the Amoonguss play by Christopher does give a little bit more health to the Amoonguss to come in. It can be a bit more disruptive, but not in the greatest position now, because maybe in Max Quake we'll be able to pick up the Incineroar from the range that it's at now, and definitely a Flare Blitz will be able to pick up the knockout into the Amoonguss. So Christopher in a really awkward spot here. Can go for a redirect, maybe, but is it going to be enough for your Incineroar here to be able to pick up the knockout onto the Venusaur? And that's what you want. You want the free turn. You can't rage powder the Venusaur because of that grass type, and it will just ignore it.
Venusaur going to go here for the Max Quake, once again boosting up the special defense on Leonardo's side of the field, but it is going to be enough to pick up the solid KO against that opposing Incineroar. Of course, as well, Venusaur doesn't have to worry too much about any spores coming out from Amoonguss here. It really will be the partner Pokemon to Venusaur that I think Amoonguss is going to have to target down if it wants to put Pokemon to sleep. Incineroar, however, on Leonardo's side, again, going to capitalize on the sun being in the sky and stop Amoonguss from really doing anything. And I think this is where having that speed advantage has been so critical for Leonardo. He's just able to deal out big damage, take advantage of the weather, and pick up KOs, just meaning that Christopher's in a position where he's just unable to attack.
Yeah, and you know, you said it perfectly there, Lou. You know, the one thing that Leonardo was very patient when the Trick Room was in play, and just even though he did end up losing the Umbreon, it was almost a tool that was used so well in a way that it attracted all Christopher's attention from one side of the field to that one particular area, which allowed these other Pokemon to kind of come in and out until that Trick Room ended. Now he's in a position where, you know, he's just going to be able to kind of close this one up pretty easily with the Incineroar, boosted by the sun and the Weather Ball as well from this Venusaur.
Yeah, and Venusaur going for that Weather Ball in the sun, targeting down into that Calyrex. Does a huge chunk of damage, but I think it's going to be up to Incineroar to finish out this game. You see the Weakness Policy activate, though, as well. And it's a great item to have on the Calyrex, particularly if it is going to be your Dynamax Pokemon. But Dynamax turns it over, and the Incineroar able to go for that Flare Blitz into Calyrex, meaning that Leonardo is going to take this set 2-0.
Wow, what a great set for us to kick off with. Massive congratulations to Leonardo. He piloted the team so well. Got to see the Umbreon in action in both games, and